This is the What About You podcast. I'm here today with Vince Liberto. And Vince, would you start us off with a prayer?
Oh, gladly, Max. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dearest Lord, we come to you today and with a lot of gratitude. Thank you for this beautiful day. May all that we do bring us closer to you and to one another and give you greater glory. And we give it all to you through Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Mother Cabrini,
pray for us.
Jesus, meek and humble of heart,
pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
I'm very grateful to have you here today.
Thank
because
you. Glad to be here.
I can tell you're a person. I can tell in the presence that they have a strong spirit, and that's kind of rare nowadays. So when you're in the presence of somebody that spirit is strong, it's not weak. You know, you can sense. Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Max. I mean, you don't see me behind closed doors, but at the same time, I do have people. A lot of people don't know this. I was 8 years in the seminary, Jesuit seminary, which the formation is usually about 12 years. But I went 2 years I went 1 year right after I finished Jesuit. I went to Tulane for a year. And there's a lot of reasons for that too. I wanted to get away from the Catholics for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Then I went to Loyola for a year. And I made my schedule where it was like all priests and religious and nuns. And then I went to Grand Coteau in the first 2 years of novitiate, which is intense prayer. And then 3 years in St. Louis, Missouri, where that's like where you study philosophy and you get an undergraduate. And then I went to Regency, which is a period of teaching, and I taught at Jesuit in Tampa and Jesuit in Houston, straight Jesuit in Houston. And then, I don't know, the decision to leave the seminary came really quick. I never thought I'd leave.
How many years was it that you were in? 8?
I was 8, yeah.
Well, how long does it take to get the credentials?
Like for the Jesuits, I was about 4 or 5 years away from ordination.
As a priest?
As a priest, yeah.
And so what happened to cause you to think that you weren't called for that?
There's a simple answer, I guess, but just the hormones kicked in. Mm-hmm, I mean, the hormones were always there. But I think that's something, I always say that, it's like something people can understand.
No, it is. It's a challenge. I mean, I guess it's something that a lot of Catholics and also people outside the Catholic Church talk about. You know, it's a question about the celibacy vow and the history of it. It's not always been in the Catholic Church, right? It's only been for about 1,000 years.
I think almost from the very beginning there was like celibacy there, but it wasn't a requirement for peace. I mean, St. Peter had a mother-in-law. You know, that was the first pope. Mm-hmm. And for the first 1,000 years, they didn't have. I mean, but there's a celibate tradition, and I think it adds a lot. Like, some people are really just called to it. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. They're celibate because they want to be. There's no other real reason.
And it's a beautiful thing. But I guess I hate to be critical of my church, but I mean, I think if you love something, you can be praising it and be critical at this. You can do both. That's just like a family or whomever. So I say celibacy is a beautiful thing. But then if it's a requirement to be a priest, it can be limiting in the priesthood, and people can commit to the celibacy vow who aren't really ready for it or prepared for it and stuff. And so, I don't know. So anyway.
No, but I think, believe it or not, there's nothing in a priestly vocation for priesthood, like diocesan priesthood, that mandates celibacy. That's the religious priesthood. Mm-hmm. I mean, religious vows, poverty, chastity, obedience. To follow Jesus as Jesus was celibate, or Jesus was poor, or Jesus was obedient. But to be a priest itself, I think priests, diocesan priests, who aren't, like they call them religious, that's Jesuits, Dominicans, Benedictines, those priests, it gets complicated when you have a family, and I don't think, people really don't want, for the most part, they want their priests to be celibate, at least in New Orleans.
Maybe so, but I mean, in the other Christian churches and in other other religions, the religious leaders, who are maybe very much active in their congregation, their flock, they can be married. And so we have and I can edit it out if you want, but they have the sex abuse history, with children and things like that.
Right.
And it just makes me wonder sometimes if the requirement of the celibacy factors in there at all, and if that was lifted, if maybe that wouldn't be as much of an issue. Or I know
I'm hearing you.
I know they're putting safeguards. They've put safeguards in place so this won't be an issue going forward anyway. But nonetheless,
I want to stay right there. Believe it or not, the biggest abusers, they did research on this. Protestants. Each Protestant it's like the same percentage of abusers a Protestant. And two, the biggest offenders, believe it or not, do you want to take a guess who the biggest offenders are as far as sexual abuse to minors goes?
I was thinking, priests?
Coaches.
Oh.
Believe it or not, just coaches are
because they're around
offenders.
Young people all the time.
You don't hear it.
No, that's true.
So, as far as the church is concerned, a lot of times there's not enough evidence really that's the case, But I really believe that there's an anti-Catholic, anti-Catholic bias. Like, for instance,
Well, isn't there? There's always been an anti-Catholic bias, just like any kind of. There's an anti-Jewish bias with some. There's an anti-Muslim bias. There's an anti-American bias. Any group that has power and authority is going to have anti-bias from some other.
The church has lasted 2,000 years. Nothing on this earth has been, no institution, like that. Hinduism's older, much older.
But it's not it's not a formal organized church like Jesus started with Peter, right?
Yeah, I heard a really interesting take on this, and it's like Satanists, these devil worshippers. They don't go after Protestant churches that have a form of communion. They go after the Catholic Church. That's the one they want. That's the Eucharist they want.
That's kind of a compliment in a sense to saying this is the real deal.
Exactly. Not only the real deal, but you're right on, Max. They think that we have this thing with the real presence. They want the real presence. The Satan worshipers believe in the real presence probably more than Catholics do.
I never understood the Satan worship because
they wanted Jesus, so they could spit on it or whatever.
How does the Satan work? Unless if it's just you're infected by demons, but if you're a Satan worshiper, what's the goal there? You get to hell if you win. That's the goal.
Maybe the pleasures and the pain. I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know. I'm not a Satanist, but I think it's a riot.
When I was a teenager, I met somebody one point who said he was a Satanist and he was practicing Satan and satanic things in his house or whatever. And I was at the time I was agnostic, but even still I was really just disturbed by. I don't get it. It's if you're very successful, then you'll be in hell as a Satanist.
Right.
How can you win? And the story that the devil is gonna is a betrayer.
Right.
It's just what good could they want? But I know back in the 70s, a lot of the pop music or there was rumors or they would say, they this and that with Satan. I know they've talked about with Jimmy Page was involved with dark arts, and you have Ozzy Osbourne, and who's the guy, Alice Cooper.
Yeah,
and
Alice
so many
Cooper's
of these
a great
guys.
Christian, believe it or not.
So I don't know if that was all just how much of that was for publicity and stuff.
Probably.
Or,
I don't know.
Or if they say, hey, I'll sell my soul to get famous. That's that
but
important
Max,
to me.
The church would even maintain if they're doing the best with what they got for searching the truth. You see now this sounds twisted, but if they're really honestly, and only they can answer that really, start doing the best with what they got, trying to search the truth, the church would call that unam sanctam, they're still going to have a baptism of desire and get to heaven if they're honestly searching for the truth. Does that make sense?
Here's another question.
I'm no authority on this. I just know that what I read.
If they're honestly searching for the truth and it leads them to Satanism, but they're I
don't know.
Okay.
I don't understand it.
Well,
I don't think we ever will. I don't think we could.
Since you know a lot about the church, my question...
I have an MA in theology, but I don't know about that.
But you were in the 8 years and also 8 years in the
seminar.
So, okay. My belief, and this is, I guess, not Catholic, okay, but my belief is that God has always had a relationship with humans throughout all time and today, including if people have never heard of Jesus or whatever, that just like people speak foreign languages, God speaks to people and brings covenants to people in the language and culture that they can understand, that makes sense to them at a time. And we're now, the Western world and most of the world here, we're in this new covenant, this covenant with Jesus for the last 2,000 years. And because the covenant was made, I think, with Moses originally, right? That it had become, I think society had changed in those, whatever it was, 3,000 years. And that covenant did not make sense with the people. It was time. They were ready, I think, for a new covenant. So God became man. And also by doing that at that particular time, when in the Roman Empire, it was going to allow the persecution, Jesus' suffering and his sacrifice, and then resurrection, and then the story, how that affected the people that witnessed that, his disciples. It spreads like wildfire, and it takes a few hundred years, but it keeps spreading and spreading, and they get persecuted, and then it eventually becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire, which is kind of the known Western world at that time. And so it was a perfect time for God to come down and give this new covenant, I think, to the world.
No, well, I mean, I don't know about all that really, but I just do know that for me, and that, I mean, that's your kind of...
That's my own...
Yeah. For me, it was just too many... All those people couldn't be wrong. It's like it just spread so fast. There's the power, the resurrection. They really believe that there's a bunch of reasons why to believe in the resurrection, but what's that movie? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Whatever, not movie, game show.
Yeah.
Like, when they do a lifeline, it's like, all right, who says A, B, or C? Never know. Like, all those people can't be wrong, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and
I think that's elements there. It's not the only thing.
If it wasn't true what they witnessed with the resurrection, then all these people were behaving completely opposite to their incentives, because it wasn't as if, I'm going to go evangelize and say Jesus did reappear, to us afterwards, and therefore I'll get rich and I'll get a private jet. I'll be a televangelist or something. No, I'm going to go spread this, and I know just like Jesus was persecuted by other Jews and by the Romans, I'm probably going to be. And they were, they were crucified upside down. They were fed to lions. Exactly They were burned at the stake. So
nobody's going to do that for just an idea.
Nobody would do that for a lie, not nonetheless.
A lie
to say,
or an idea.
No, but I'm saying it would be a lie to say Jesus resurrected, Jesus, came again, and all these people are going to share that lie. These people that were with Jesus just say, let's keep this story going. Let's just share this lie that Jesus did resurrect, and they're all going to just say that, and then go to this continue on this difficult life, an even more difficult life than they had when Jesus was with them, and to punishments, to death, to persecution. It's illogical that they would do that unless the resurrection was real.
Exactly, you hit it on the head. Not that many people would, to the amount of martyrs that they had in the tradition. You see what I'm saying? You said it. You said it. Nobody's going to do that for an idea. It had to be something mysterious that comes from the heart, and it's all inexplainable. We can't explain why somebody would do that, or why, even 2,000 years later, we can't explain why we necessarily believe. It ultimately comes down to a mystery. I mean, we go all day long, why this, why do you believe this, but it's ultimately just a mystery.
And I come back to the Trinity of humanity that some people call the body, the mind, and the spirit.
Right, exactly.
This Trinity. And so a lot of people, they'll have a strong body but a weak mind and a weak spirit, or a strong mind but a weak body and a weak spirit. And I think a key, ideally a healthy person is balanced in all these areas, but especially nowadays people are weak in the spirit.
I want to interject that.
Go.
I tell the girls that, the thing about a Catholic education, other schools are just educating the mind and the body, but the three dimension of a person, as you said, educates the mind, the body, and the soul. And without an education of the soul or spirit, there's no education at all, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of things nowadays in society are better than they were 70 years ago, but a lot of things are worse. And one thing I think is the way overall that people, the average person on the street sometimes behaves, especially in big cities and things, is worse than before. And I think the family units have been broken down compared to 70 years ago. And, we had the Supreme Court rule many, many decades ago. You couldn't have, in public schools, you couldn't have any kind of Bible readings. You couldn't have any voluntary prayer that's led by the school, which I understand it's a government school. And so if you're of a different religion, and I can understand that, but to me, that's why it's critical to be in a school where the kids have that third part. They can get, athletics and PE. They can get the critical, also intellectual education, but the spiritual education, because it used to be with public schools, I think there was so much where people like Protestants, they'd go on Wednesday night to the church. They'd go spend a lot of the Sunday at the church, or Catholics, similar kind of a thing, spending a lot of time at church and that kind of thing, and keeping the Sabbath much more holy. And that's become a lot less now. So they're not getting it, in the school. Right. Then they come home, the parents are busy, maybe they're sleeping in on Sunday, they're not getting it at all. And they're not, hearing much. And that, I think, leads to, without God, any kind of guidance toward God, it leads to family breakdown. It leads to a lot of the problems we see, I think.
Well, we know this as teachers. The home always wins out. They're the primary teachers. Like, it's an old pedagogical thing. The home will always win out over the teacher. So if they're not getting it from the home religion, no matter what we do here. But John Paul II, the Pope, he really went after this and said that the family, if the devil wanted to destroy us, he'd take out the father and he would take out the family, because the family is a cell of society we can ill afford to lose. And that's true. It's the cell of society. Kept the families strong, kept society strong.
Yeah.
So, that's it.
No,
but, talk about the church. One of the things we as Catholics believe is that, if you look at, of course, Protestants got the word Protestant from protesting, and they're all once a part of the Catholic Church. Of course, the church it's always been kind of a mess,
Well, it seems like at that time, whatever, 500 years ago, 600 years ago, etc., it was especially a mess as far as with the selling of the indulgences and
but we still always had a successor to Peter. It was Peter, Linus, Cletus, etc. Just like George Washington, you could trace it all the way back.
We did, but at some of those times, the successor wasn't. It was really picked for political reasons.
Yeah,
or
terrible.
Picked by a leader of a country like France or something.
Dorothy Day, who was a great church woman, who Catholic worker, fed the poor. Are you familiar with Dorothy Day? Anyway, she said this is
Doris Day though.
Yeah, Doris Day. I love Doris Day. Anyway, Dorothy Day said the church is a whore, but she's your mother. And this is somebody who goes to Mass every day, says the rosary every day. She's really devotional. She's a saint,
And so what you're saying, I guess, is she's imperfect.
Right. The church is a whore, but she's your mother.
Yeah.
She's still your mother.
Yeah.
What you going to do? And, I think something that's, like Pope Francis said.
Who is Dorothy Day again?
Oh, you got to Google her or whatever. Okay. She's fantastic. She started the Catholic Worker Movement, which was a movement of soup kitchens around. She's like,
I'm very much like that idea.
Yeah. Oh, you got to go. You got to find out more about Dorothy Day. Yeah, she was really something. She smoked a lot. She didn't just die not too long ago even.
The thing I think that I like, so many things about the Catholic faith. more than Protestant faiths, and a big part of the Protestant faith that I have trouble with is where they say, you're saved only through faith alone.
Right.
And I guess I can understand and how that can be true in a certain way. But to me, it's a selfish way to look at it.
Right.
And
I don't like this, so I'm leaving.
Yeah.
We've
I'm
got
saved.
all that they have and more. You know what I'm saying? They're a subset of you want scripture. We got scripture. You want, Wednesday night, whatever. We got everything that they have plus more. I just don't understand. I mean, for me, it's different.
Do you ever go to Protestant services?
Protestant service. I mean, I always feel just so different. Like and forgive me, but that's just not my spirituality. It's not.
No,
it's
I
not my
understand,
way.
but what I'm saying is, if you're going to criticize Protestant services or they're going to criticize Catholic services, I think we should go to their services and they should come to our services and better understand it. Because a lot of times when Protestants criticize Catholicism, I think they say things that, to me, my understanding, and I'm not an expert on Catholicism, but seem wrong. Like they say that we worship Mary, which no, we pray to Mary for intercession, and we pray to other saints and other people that have gone before us and it's basically just my understanding of it. We're just like asking a friend for help. Like you'd say, hey, could you help me lift this thing? And you're praying to, hey, be there with me. Could you say a prayer for me? Could you, pray to God with me? It's not as if we're praying to Mary as if she's God.
Right.
Is that correct?
Definitely. No, if we were on the other side of the globe, like in Japan or China, they would clump us Protestants and Catholics together as Christians. Yeah, you know that. But, and I keep quoting the popes, but this is what's sort of coming to me right now. Yeah. John the 23rd said, all we have separating us is ideas, and that's nothing. But, some people say ideas are everything. We have so much more that we have in common than we don't. And, really in today's times with an anti-church society or secular society, it's time for Protestants, Catholics, Muslims, and Jews, too, to come together. People of faith have to come together.
No, I agree.
And I know I probably, in the first part of this podcast, sounded like real, like Catholic triumphal. But, if I wasn't that way,
you wouldn't be
then
Catholic.
I wouldn't be Catholic. Exactly.
Yeah.
Good for you, Max. That's
no,
right.
Yeah, I agree. What about what you kind of touched on about the different faiths coming together? So people talk about when you study the different religions, Western, Abrahamic religions or Eastern religions, there's a lot of centrality in the message of love, relationship with God, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or also as you would have God do unto them, and so I think that's important. Yeah. And another thing that I've been coming back to is, when Jesus, I've been watching a little bit of this show, The Chosen. You ever seen that? It's on all kinds of different platforms. It's by Angel Studios.
Yeah.
And so I've been watching that. And Jesus, when God came down, he chose as his father on earth, he chose a carpenter. And so he became a carpenter, which is a builder.
Yeah.
And then he was a rabbi, which is a teacher. But he wasn't a lawyer. He could have come down and been a lawyer. He was very critical, and his main adversaries were the Jewish leaders who were all about the law, and they weren't recognizing how he was fulfilling a lot of the promises of the Old Testament. My point is that I think it's unchristian when we get too much in the weeds of the law and not focus just on the central message of loving one another as God would have us do and having a relationship with God, and just don't worry so much. Just focus on the basics of a relationship with God and treating other people as God would treat them with love.
The most beautiful and most noble truths in the world are found in, I guess, the 5 great religions of the world. And, the whole ecumenical movement of Catholicism.
What does ecumenical mean?
Means celebrating the differences or that we have together. I mean, that's a good question. It comes from the Greek, ekumenos, something or other, but it's like we're just more than just ourselves, but if you read the document on it, it says something along the lines of, and this is kind of arrogant on the church's part to say this, but if we didn't believe it, we wouldn't be Catholic again. Mm-hmm. If we have the fullness of truth, like the Hindus and the Muslims and the Buddhists have truth, and there's the most beautiful truths in the world, but the fullness of truth lies in the Catholic.
No, I don't think.
I sound terrible saying all that.
I don't think you should apologize, because I think
right,
the Lord speaking through you, and that's. It's not to be critical of other people in other faiths.
Not at all.
I think it could be. I don't know.
Well, Francis would say, "Go forth in your Hinduism. Go forth in your Hinduism." But if you stay a Hinduist, if you really pursue the most like Hinduism at its core, you'll eventually, which is kind of an arrogant kind of a thing, you'll eventually come to the fullness of truth. But that's the Unam Sanctam again. A Hindu, somebody that doesn't acknowledge Christ at all, who's truly following, doing the best that they can, mm-hmm. gets a baptism of desire, they call it, a baptism of desire, and would, be in eternal life as much as any, maybe even the best Catholics. You know what I'm saying?
No, I agree with that. I agree with that too. It just stands to logic to me, where I don't see an all-loving God, the God that I read about, especially in the New Testament, but just God. I don't see the logic of, well, you weren't born in a country where Christ was allowed to be talked about, therefore you're all damned to hell. Yeah. You're all damned to eternal hell because you're born in North Korea where Christianity is banned.
Yeah.
So no, I think what you're saying about the, what do you call that? The subjugation of the will, or it's basically
baptism of desire.
Baptism of desire. Yes, that's what it was. Baptism of. Another thing that, and so I guess we're being critical of non-Catholic people to a certain degree, but we're also complimenting and saying that we're all one at the same time in this episode. But what another criticism I have of Protestants is they say, well, all you need is, in addition to that criticism I had about faith alone. So my thing is, okay, yeah, it could be faith alone, but if you are saved, then you should want to be like Jesus.
It's going to manifest itself.
And what did Jesus do is he spent all of his times with prostitutes, with tax collectors, with sickly people, all the people everybody else was avoiding, he was giving to them. So he was doing works, and he was saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so to me, if you're a follower of Christ, it's saying this is how you're supposed to be. And so if you're saved in Christ, the work should just be a natural offspring of that. So as a criticism of Catholics to say, well, no, works don't matter, it's only faith in Christ, it just doesn't.
Right. A lot of what you get to is, I'm a good person, I'm going to go to heaven, that kind of thing. Or I got my Bible. On a Sunday, I'm just going to go read the Bible. But you can really kind of bullshit yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's why you need community. I'm really good. Look at me. I'm really good. Yeah, but I think I want to do this or that. And it's like the great thing about the church, we've got 2,000 years of teaching led by the Holy Spirit to help us along that moral road. I mean, conscience. I'm following Hitler followed his conscience.
Yeah, exactly.
But your conscience has to be informed and formed
and challenged.
Challenged
by other believers.
That's
honestly, right. Like it reminds me of in the St. Vincent de Paul Society, and founded by, among others, Frederick Ozanam.
Yeah, that's great.
And so they'd have these discussion sessions when he was in college, and so he'd have agnostics, he'd have atheists, he'd have Catholics like him, and he'd have other all kind of different people, and they wouldn't talk about politics. They'd talk about all kinds of different subjects. But a part of one of the discussions that really broke through to him is, and I'm just going to have to paraphrase it, but the guy who says, "Yeah, you Catholics, you might have done all these great things through history, But what do you do? What are you doing now? What do you do? What do you do? All you do is pray. What does that matter? And so
that's right. Just he had a church that had no outreach to the poor.
Yeah, and so that I think was an impetus between both him and others starting the St. Vincent de Paul Society and putting it into action. So maybe like this episode of the podcast that people are listening to is saying, maybe you're being called to put your faith into action. And it could be in simple ways, but especially if you can spend time finding people who are in a difficult situation. It doesn't have to be some going to a soup kitchen, but it could be that. It could be just doing simple, nice things for people. Somebody's hurting and you're empathetic.
Yeah.
Like I think one of the things when I've suffered in my life, it's brought me closer to God. And it's also brought me empathy.
Right.
I feel empathy for other people that are suffering because I understand what it is to suffer. And I think God suffered when he came down.
No cross, no crown.
Yeah.
No other way no crucifixion, no resurrection.
Yeah, he was celebrated at times. He was mocked at times. He was ridiculed, but he was put on the cross. Yeah. He suffered. He didn't have to come down and choose to be a person that was going to go through some of the most horrible sufferings, but he did. And what was his message was, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And his way, the way that he chose, was to suffer and have his life cut short. And so I think people say, well, if God exists, why I prayed for this, but I'm still suffering. I prayed for this, but she still died. I prayed for, well, if you only believe that our human life here is all there is, well, then that makes sense. But if you believe that this is just a phase of our soul journey, if this is just a test that we have to go through in the journey of our spirit, well, then dying here, that's not a bad thing. And suffering, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I would say use your suffering. Channel your suffering. Like they say some languages, they have the same word for crisis as opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Because without a crisis, without that, change never happens. Crisis brings about change. And so the crisis of suffering can bring you become more empathetic. It can bring about a lot of things that are necessary.
Yeah. There's no other way through. Like, gold has to be in fire, tested by fire. And that's the way the Lord cleanses us. And, he did it for some reason. There's a lot of lessons in the cross. It's like, if it's this way for Jesus, who's God, why should it be different for anybody else?
Yeah.
But, Mother Teresa, I just happen to have a holy card of her. You can keep that, Max.
Thanks.
It's been through 3 hands today. It's a long story. But anyway, she said, you don't have, like you said, you don't have to go out to a soup kitchen. Just love your family at home. Charity begins at home. If I'm out doing charitable things all around the city, and then my mother's, yeah, exactly. And some people do that. It's horrible.
It doesn't have to be complicated.
I've done that to some extent.
The meaning of life, you say, what's the meaning of life? To me, the meaning of life is very simple. It could be, like in the movie City Slickers. I don't know if you ever remember. Yeah. And the guy, one of the guys, the cowboy, Billy Crystal said, he says, the meaning of life? And Billy Crystal says, no, what is it? And he says, one thing. And Billy Crystal says, what's the one thing? And he says, well, that's what you have to figure out for yourself.
Right. This was like 1990 or something.
Yeah, it's something, but it's stuck with me. But it's the meaning of your life might be to be a great grandmother to your grandchildren. It might be, to me, the meaning of life is to do just one good thing for somebody.
Right.
And then, you know what? Then maybe the next moment or 2 days from now, do one more good thing for somebody as God would have you do for. If you just do that, and if you quiet your spirit, if you quiet your mind and your body, especially your mind, so that you can hear where you're being guided and you can read the signs that you're being given. and then you just follow those signs, God will take care of the rest. You got to take the steps. You can't just say, okay, God, bring everything to my doorstep. But if you listen to the signs, I believe, and then you take the steps, then God can make a lot happen.
Exactly. Loaves and the fishes.
Yeah.
Lord, I don't have a whole lot, but I give it to you, and then it just turns into a whole bunch of other great things.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's about where that's some great insights so far. I think that's that's great.
So, one thing, could you tell me about Mother Teresa?
Mother Teresa.
So a lot of people, especially young people, some Catholics know all about Mother Teresa, and especially 30 years, 40 years ago, she was very well known.
Right.
I remember when she died at the same time as Princess Diana.
That's right.
And it was wall to wall. The world was all focused on Princess Diana dying, and it was an afterthought that Mother Teresa died. And I always thought that was it said a lot about the world to me more than anything else.
What's weird is that they're accusing her now of she just did Band-Aid work. What did she really do for the poor? Did she change the social structures to really alleviate poverty? Not necessarily, no. But everything she did all day long was a corporal work of mercy. And that's what I wanted to say. But
and she didn't, even if she just did one thing for one person, that's all that matters. We don't have to defend her, and she doesn't need to defend herself. It's only between herself and God.
That's right.
If she was doing whatever she was doing, if she was doing it, what she felt called by God to do.
That's right. That's it. The vocation, called, what she was called. And then, something you said earlier reminded me of just that, we don't have a whole lot of time left. And you're talking about the nice things. That's why I like the classroom so much. There's like a million opportunities every day to do something nice for somebody. And Mother Cabrini called the girls or whoever, the young people, she called them like wax because they're so moldable, And I think when you're young and what you do in the formation of young people, it just stays with them forever. Some of the little stupid things that happen in a class, I think, are the things they remember forever.
Yeah. And just some stuff I think they don't even remember, but it becomes part of who they then become. And
that's true. And they don't even know where it's coming from.
Yeah. And then that goes forward and it influences other people and other young people in the future, and it spreads. That's right.
There's no substitute for it.
We don't have to know. It goes back to, one thing I was saying earlier about the Trinity of the person and the spirit being a part of it, that people say, well, no, there really is just the body, or there's just the body and the mind, as kind of one thing. But the spirit, to me, the reason people don't see it is because they try to find the spirit with their mind. And you can't reason the spirit. You can't find the spirit with your mind. If the spirit exists, it's something greater than the human mind.
Yeah.
It's about channeling the spirit. It's about meditating and getting in a godly, place and just listening and maybe talking too, but just listening. And, that, I think that, I don't know how to say that other way.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It all comes down to just the formation of the whole person. And my favorite scripture quote of all times, and I really think, this is all you need to know to be sort of an aficionado, is not a fan of religion kind of thing, or a fan of Christianity, is that when Jesus says in John 10:10, I come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. I come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. That, and the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So, I think...
So you're not doing God a favor by honoring God on the seventh day. God is really doing you the favor of a relationship with God.
That's a good way to put it.
And a rest from just focusing on the body and the mind, and having 1/7 of your time focused on the spirit.
Right.
God doesn't need the Sabbath.
Well, I mean,
We do.
why am I a Catholic? Because it makes my world a better place to live in now and in the beyond. But
And time is short.
exactly, you're not going to live. That's especially as I get older. Hell, I'm 58 now. That's especially coming apparent to me. Like
With every year that passes, it becomes more
Exactly.
common and more
I'm looking
apparent.
at things coming through here. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is minutia compared to, I think, one great encounter, with a student here at Cabrini. That's really, I mean, minutia.
Yeah.
This is about putting money in my pocket, Oh, it's a shame. I don't know why the Lord made us this way. That we've got to, it's original sin. That's why we have to break our backs, which is a whole nother,
And it's a way to, I think it's a way to grow, and we make mistakes.
Yeah.
And sometimes we learn from the mistakes, and we can share that with other people. That's a benefit of being a teacher is you get to share some of what you've learned the hard way or just from seeing it from other people, and hopefully other people can grow from that.
Yeah.
And so many other things.
There's miracles that happen sort of every day if we just look for them all the time.
Yes.
But I mean, I'm talking about this like, it's some kind of a, Cabrini, some kind of a Garden of Eden where, great things happen all the time. I mean, a lot of days, my classes are a wreck. Well, I'm subbing now, but, you just don't, I feel like, nothing went well today. Nothing went right, That's where a lot of it is. But I mean, like the foundress of the Sacred Heart Sisters, Sacred Heart over there, she said, if we help one girl, this whole enterprise of schools is worth it, and that's the way I sort of look at my day sometimes. It's like, if just one thing, one formative thing happens, even in the midst of just, getting spitballs at me and all, that's just it too, Bax. I think that, this kind of work that we do is like, we're shoveling dirt. And even if the mountain's this big, it's still worth it. That kind of thing. You see what I'm saying? Like
just have a Christly focus on doing the one good thing, and and then doing the next good thing. But when I was talking to Miss Sherry Salvaggio, this was one. She was telling me, recounting the story where the storm is happening and the disciples are frantic and Jesus is asleep in the boat. And so as Jesus is not worried, he all these distractions that the world throws at us and all these, slings and arrows, and Jesus knows he's spiritually at peace. He knows, he has the great vision. And so I think, if we're going to follow Jesus, we should try to strive for that, just the peace of Christ, and just whatever
peace of Christ.
Whatever happens to me, if somebody comes and spits on me, if somebody comes and cancels me, does whatever the bad thing is, I have faith in Christ, and I know this is all part of the plan, and so good's going to come out of this crisis. Good's going to come out of these horrible things that are happening to me today, and I'm sure tomorrow some horrible thing might happen to me, or the next day some horrible thing's going to happen to you. Some joyous things are going to happen to me too, but the toils, the suffering and the joys of life are part of the meaning of life, and we can control how we respond. If we respond in a Christly, peaceful way, and focus on still helping people.
Yeah. St. Paul to the Romans, all things work together for those who trust in the Lord. If God's for us, who can be against us? It all goes back, sort of the loaves and the fishes. This is all I have, take it. Another great thing from John the 23rd was he said that, he was up in the Vatican, he's walking around, and he's looking out the window, and he's worried. He found himself worried. And he goes, God, this is your church, not mine. I'm going to bed. You know what I'm saying? Like, and the same thing with our lives. I mean, our lives don't belong to us, believe it or not. They were given to us by God. They're eventually going to go to God. And so, our lives, it's not my life, Lord, it's yours. I'm going to bed. That's the way we should be to some extent, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. They have that song from, 10 years ago, said, Jesus, take the wheel.
Yeah. Country song.
Yeah. That's
funny. They say all of life can be summed up in country songs or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great thing. I'm not a huge country music aficionado or anything. I like a lot of like a Willie Nelson or Johnny Cash and that kind of thing back, and some of the stuff more modern. But a thing I like about him is very lyric focused and meaningful lyrics. It could just be it could be a meaningful lyric just about a silly thing that's happened in your day or some silly kind of human experience we all have. But I like music that focuses on lyrics is one thing I enjoy about music.
Yeah, Johnny Cash's first wife was Vivian Liberto. That was the name. Right.
And a good friend of mine growing up, his name's Nick Deliberto.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, and he's his nephew of Buddy Deliberto.
Really?
Yeah.
He was a Brother Martin guy, was it?
Yeah, it was. Nick, how did you know that?
I think I heard of him or something. But that's no relation at all.
Oh, yeah, because his dad
Except maybe in Roman times.
His dad is Joe Deliberto. That's Buddy's youngest brother. And then Buddy went to Jesuit.
Yeah, class of 48.
48. And then Joe, he went to St. Aloysius, I think around 66 or so he graduated. And then Nick and I, we were both in Brother Martin class of 93.
Oh, wow.
But we've known each other our whole life because his dad and my dad became friends at Southeastern.
Oh, wow.
Because my dad played football in high school at Warren Easton.
Oh, wow.
And then some of the friends he met there, they played football at Southeastern, and Joe and some of his friends came from St. Aloysius, and they played football there. So it's so they made connections before I was born. So it's kind of lifelong friends. Yeah.
I mean, New Orleans is something else, man.
Yeah, you can't go anyplace else and get New Orleans. It's
really can.
Because I've lived other places, and especially when I was young, I was saying, well, I want to go out there, and there's better places. Kind of looking at the glass half empty of New Orleans. It's easy to look at the glass half empty of anything. Yeah. But I was like, there's not enough opportunity here, this and that. I'm going to go, and so I did, and I went and lived other places, and they were nice places. Yeah. But one thing, among others, you can't come is the people of New Orleans. You can't find them, unless they happen to be moved over there. But basically, if you and so you got to come back to New Orleans for New Orleans people.
Yeah. Like I think my daughter's there right now. I mean, she's in New Orleans, got a good job and a great setup. But I can tell she's like, wants to get away. And there's no way to teach it, I mean, I was away for 8 years myself, Great cities, St. Louis, Tampa, Houston, Southwest Louisiana. But there's
New Orleans gets in your blood.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like the greater New Orleans area because I've never actually even lived in New Orleans. I was born and raised in Metairie, and then I've lived since 2002. I lived in St. Tammany Parish. So I've never lived in New Orleans. My dad was born and raised in New Orleans,
That's right,
that kind of thing. And my grandparents on his side lived in New Orleans, but then I've been living in the suburbs basically. But I consider that the greater New Orleans area.
Is your father still with us?
Yeah, he is.
Oh wow.
He's Warren Easton class of 66, I think.
Really? Mm-hmm. I know that's the thing too. Like you could go to Warren Easton, step out like right there down Canal, and stand in the doorway. And Lee Harvey Oswald, who shot Kennedy, went there. Pete Fountain, the greatest clarinetist in the world. Steve Van Buren, NFL football Hall of Famer, played for the Eagles, went there at LSU. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and when he was there, he told me a story about how they still had a textbook there that had Lee Harvey Oswald's name in it. God. Yeah. So, because I guess, Oswald, he shot Kennedy when I guess my dad was around a freshman or something like that. Right. So it was all over. And so they happened to find a textbook that was still there.
They did.
That had his name written in it.
Did.
And I remember the guy who used to work at Cabrini, and I'm forgetting his name. He was a maintenance guy who worked with Mr. Bill at the time. This is back like in 06, 07. He'd been here a while. But he went to school with Lee Harvey Oswald, and he was saying how he was he wasn't a good guy basically and stuff.
What, he would get in fights or something?
I think he was they were saying, he was a nut, And
no, I really believe that there's like New Orleans roots and mafia roots, and he wanted to be somebody. I really believe, and like he was working down at Briley downtown, cleaning the coffee pots or whatever, where they made the coffee or whatever, and he thought that was so humiliating, good labor like that.
Well, I had read or I don't know if I read or listened to, but in the Warren Commission testimony, I think it was where it was. And his supervisor at Riley, he said that that Lee would come around and point his index finger at his coworkers and go, "Pow!"
Oh, that's terrible.
Pow!
Oh,
and the reason it came up is because it was coming up with how did he get this job at the Texas School Book Depository, and he was trying at that same time. Before he got that, he was really trying to get this job in the printing office, and he had some experience with printing. And so the guy was about to hire him, but he's doing his due diligence, so he calls his previous employer, Riley, and Riley's like, no, whatever you do, don't hire this guy. He's a nut. He's like lazy, and he's crazy.
How, handing out communist propaganda on Canal Street.
Just wanted to be somebody. And
what's something he wanted to find out in the spring before he killed. I don't mean to get on this.
No, please do.
But the spring of
63.
Yeah, before he killed the president in November or whatever, he went down and he used to live on like Napoleon and Magazine, and he caught a bus and went down Metairie Road and turned on Elmira because his aunt was there, and he wanted to find out, according to the FBI report, because I read the FBI report, he wanted to find out what his father was like, because he never really met his father.
His father died right before he was born.
Anyway, I'm driving down Elmira, and the ladies in front who kind of knew it, I said, do you realize Lee Harvey Oswald sat in your front row talking to the grandmother about his father? It was about the spring before he shot. He must have known something was up,
Well, another thing he did, I think this was in 63 too. I think this is right before he moved to New Orleans. Earlier in 63, he was living in Dallas, and there was this right-wing general, I forget, Walker, I think was the guy's last name, and he left his house, took a bus, and drove over and went over to this guy's house, and then from the street he tried to shoot the guy, shot through his window, and so for a long time it was a mystery. Who shot this general was in the news, this and that. Then it came out after the assassination that he had written a bunch about it in the 2 weeks, before and after in his diary, and so, yeah. He
also went to Beauregard, too.
Oh, yeah?
And I don't know, the FBI report or whatever, they said that he was always getting in fights there, and I know there was this guy who went to Jesuit without revealing too much.
Okay.
Nobody knew this, but I sort of traced it back from the FBI. I went up to him, and I just said, because I knew him a little bit, I said, Lee Harvey Oswald, and he just turned white. He goes, how did you know that? He goes, nobody knows that.
So this guy knew Lee?
He was related to him.
Oh.
He was like our age.
Oh, and he didn't want to keep it secret because he didn't want to be associated with it.
Well, it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't like that. It's an incredibly charitable family.
Yeah.
And
well, everybody's got...
because they were so poor, they took them in or something, because they were cousins or something. But
everybody's got people in their family that have something. I think I'm the one in my family that's kind of... But everybody's got people in their family that have this or that. And for him, he had some mental issues, it appears, or whatever, or some personality issues. And, I did an episode of the podcast all about Lee Harvey Oswald. Really, yeah.
It's endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, and so it was about why I think he was the assassin of Kennedy.
I really believe it. You do?
Yeah, I do.
Think so too.
Well, originally I kind of just assumed it, and then for a long time I believed that maybe he wasn't because of some, because I was thinking, well, the CIA and Mafia were working together, this and that, and there are other kinds of things you could put together, but the thing that in that episode, I think it's my episode 3 of my podcast, the crux of the matter for me is how did he get the job at the Texas School Book Depository? Because if that was, because he only got it a month before. Yeah, he did. He worked there. So if...
I thought he just kind of snuck up there.
No, he worked there. So, and he got the job about a month before. So how he got that job is really critical. So if they knew, let's say the president is going to be coming by here and we've got this guy we want to install, and so let's make sure we get him the job, then okay, well then there's this huge conspiracy, that kind of thing. But if he got the job just by happenstance, and basically that's what my findings are, is that I'm not going to go into it right now, but I went through it in that episode. But he it just was by happenstance that he got this job. So
it just makes too much sense.
Yeah.
Like Marcello hated the Kennedys. they dropped him off in the middle of Guatemala
Yeah.
or something, all of that. And then you got
'Cause
this
he
guy
said-
who wants to be somebody.
Marcelo-
He's right here.
he claimed that he was from in his papers to work that he filled out the federal government. He claimed that he was from Guatemala for some reason, and so Bobby Kennedy said, "Oh, well, okay, you're from Guatemala." So next time the Marcelo went, because he wasn't a citizen, so next time that Marcelo had to go in to like check in or whatever he had to do, he had the FBI just grab him, put him on a plane, and drop him off in the middle of the jungle in Guatemala in a 3-piece fancy suit.
Yeah, and he got out
and he
somehow.
survived. Yeah, but he definitely.
It was really something. I mean, I remember meeting Carlos Marcelo on several different occasions in New Orleans. Like you'd go into like Lenfant's, which was a restaurant by the cemeteries, and he'd be there in the corner with 2 blondes, and my father knew him, kind of thing, and he would say, "Hey, there he is." Or I remember being at, some of his grandchildren went to Jesuit, and I remember being over there and just seeing him. It looks like a nice little short guy with no neck, just sitting there at the table drinking orange juice or whatever.
That's a real interesting guy.
I think he was looking for coupons or something.
I trace it back. I have a Cabrini connection that I trace it back to because the reason Mother Cabrini came to New Orleans, is because of the lynching of the Italians.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the reason the Italians were lynched is because some Italian early mafia figures, there were these 2 warring families that were in the fruit business in New Orleans. And the police chief, a guy named David Hennessy,
Right.
he was investigating that. And then so one of them or somebody there assassinated him on his way home.
Yeah.
And then
Who did this
the
to you,
jury,
Chief?
and they said the Dagos.
Dagos.
Yeah.
His dying
And so
word.
they put these guys, they rounded up the people they suspected or whatever, and they started putting them on trial. And I think some of them were found not guilty.
Yeah.
And the community was so outraged that they went and grabbed the rest of the Italians and pulled them out and
amazing.
hung them from street posts in
It's the
Canal
biggest
Street.
lynching, I think, in Southern history.
And it was a
believe
big
or not.
worldwide story. And the Pope, I think, telegrams Mother Cabrini in New York and says,
Really?
"Need you down in New Orleans." And so that's
Wow.
how Mother Cabrini comes to New
That's
Orleans.
awesome.
And so that was the beginning. This is before really the New York Mafia really gets going. You have the Black Hand at this time. But then I think one of those guys, I think his name's Matranga.
Yeah, Matranga.
He winds up being the leader for the next 10, 20 years or so. And then I think his son, I want to say I think his name's Silver Dollar Sam Corolla or something like that.
I don't know.
I think he becomes the next guy, and then it's time for him to retire.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was, and so this is around like 47, around that time, and so his son wanted to be the next person, but I think a lot of the more powerful people in the New Orleans family, they wanted it to be, they thought Marcelo should be, and so I think they had a sit down or something with
Marcelo definitely
and
was.
they chose Marcelo to be, and then he wound up being all the way, I guess, basically until his death in '93.
And when he asked him, he said, "Why are you picking on me? I'm just a
tomato
tomato salesman."
Yeah, he was a character. It seems like, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
He was actually born in Tripoli, Africa.
Yeah. He wasn't born in.
You know
in,
a lot
in
about
Sicily.
this, Max. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
For a Croatian.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, my last name's Croatian, but I'm a quarter Sicilian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
On the mother's side?
My mother's mother is Sicilian. Both of
I
her
knew there was
parents
something I
were
liked
Sicilian.
about you. What's her name?
Well, my mother's
Italian
name is De Benedetto,
Oh, yeah, beautiful.
and then her mom's last name was Alessi.
Wow. Those are 2 great New Orleans names.
Yeah,
Sicilian.
they came. The Benedetto, Mr. De
More
Benedetto,
Sicilians
who's
here than New York at one time.
in New Orleans.
Yeah, because there was a straight
That's when-
line from Palermo to New Orleans. They just kept going. They kept going on. It was a straight line from Palermo to New Orleans.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, that's and the
the
French
ocean.
Quarter was the Italian Quarter. Back at the point when Mother Cabrini came.
Really something. Yeah.
And my grandmother's parents, before my grandmother was born, they left Sicily, and they they came to, I guess, New Orleans or someplace.
Yeah.
And then from there, they went to Independence, where they had a lot of family. And then
a lot of them, I was from Tickfaw or whatever, went up to Tickfaw for a while.
Yeah, right, same area. And that's where they had the Italian festival, I think, right around there. And then after a few years, this was in the 1890s, they moved to Bay St. Louis. And that's where they lived the rest of their life. Beautiful. And then my grandmother was born in Bay St. Louis. My mom was born in Bay St. Louis.
Really?
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's my Italian
Max,
connection.
It's kind of interesting. Like, well, I just wanted to interject this. Mother Cabrini was a ride. She gets on a train from Seattle all the way to New Orleans. Can you imagine back then how uncomfortable that would have been? And they shot at, even back then, and once she gets to New Orleans, they started shooting at the train, even back then. But I'm amazed how, and this is kind of freaky, but I really believe it. There's a lot of teachers here that tell me they think that Mother Cabrini wants them here.
Oh, no, I definitely
Isn't it something? Like, that's why they wouldn't teach anywhere else. And it turns out, like, I don't know, Chica looked at me straight in the face and said, Mother Cabrini wants you. My first thought was that's because I'm Italian or something.
Well, maybe.
But what's your take on that?
I agree. Like
Mother Cabrini herself wants
I talked about how I feel your strong spirit when we sat down to now. I've always felt this sense of Mother Cabrini's presence on this campus, where she walked here. She chose this land. She had the building built there.
It's kind of amazing. People
and
don't realize.
I still feel her presence here, and I've always kind of felt that. And I think Mother Cabrini, brought me here.
I know.
I was meant to be here.
I'm thinking of 4 right off the top of my head. They'll tell you. I think Mother Cabrini wants me here. Mm-hmm. Ann Smart has been here since 1981. She's way the heck up in Covington.
Yeah. So
every day.
I'm over in
it's a Mother Cabrini thing, she'll say,
Yeah. It just goes back to the calling and even if you ignore your calling, most of the time God will just keep putting it back in your face until you listen, I find. God puts you where you're supposed to be.
It's amazing how, like, the financial side, he makes it work out.
Yeah.
I mean, a smart guy like yourself, with a lot of talent, doing a lot of different things. Look what you're doing. I mean,
Yeah. It's just it's not what I chose to do. Like, if it was just my mind, working, I'd say, well, I want something that's the most lucrative thing, that can give my family just the most comfort. But, and so my mind does kind of want that, but my calling calls me to wherever I happen to be. And it's hard to ignore wherever your calling puts you at that particular time. And it moves, I'm going to move on, and I'm not going to stay at Cabrini my whole life. I don't think just like anybody else, right? You're here for a time and then you move on and you're meant to be somewhere else and that kind of a thing. But I feel back to that word calling.
Yeah, and I think, to some extent you suffer for it, would you say?
Yeah.
Not just financially, but it's like in the eyes of the world, like, people want you, I don't know what people want you to do, but unless, they had a CEO or something, or this or that, doctor, whatever.
I think that comes more into play when we focus on ego and comparing ourselves to others.
Exactly.
And so we go to the reunion, and this guy's got this fancy car, this guy's got these millions of dollars, and you say, oh, well, look at me, I don't have all this money, and I don't have this and that. I must be doing something wrong. But I think that's a very kind of earthly way of looking at things, and we're called to bigger things than that. We're called to follow and not to criticize those things. Maybe that's probably God's plan for those people. But this is God's plan for me, and I got to listen to wherever God's.
That's
where
really
I'm
interesting. I'm endlessly fascinated by that, Max. I was at a reunion for grammar school just this weekend, and they said boldly. I'm thinking of you might know, like, I'll mention Scott Corrente. He's done everything at Brother Martin, administration and all, and now he's in the classroom, but he's not ashamed of that or anything.
No. I don't think I think people do look down on teachers. Like I think even teachers are embarrassed when they say, "What do you do?" Just say teacher. Right. A lot of times they'll say, "I'm an educator."
Right.
That's the only time you hear people, or when they don't, you're embarrassed to say teacher, say educators or something like that. But no, I'm a teacher. But you go back to Christ's way or whatever. There wasn't things you should be embarrassed about. There was just. Right. We're all equal in the eyes of God,
but in God's plan, I mean, like what could be more incredible than your daughter? The fruit of all of this. May. I mean, my goodness, in every way.
Yeah, but if whatever her journey is, if it's something I should be so proud of or not, this goes back to what we were talking about before the podcast about with the homeless and that kind of thing. I'm not any better.
No,
not only there but for the grace of God, but I'm not any better than them. They're not. I don't think people should be embarrassed that life puts them in circumstances, and we're just go there and just meet them where they are, and just have fellowship with everybody. The people that are earthly high ups and elites, and the people that are just teachers, just like us.
Human dignity. There's a kind of nobody can take it away. There's nothing you can do about it.
Only way you can take it away is if you're comparing yourself. Again, if you're focused on if we're focused on our own ego and we're comparing ourselves to people we see as more successful. Like we see this a lot nowadays with social media, where you'll have these.
Right, they frame their
influencers.
lives.
They'll frame their lives, and they're showing you what you want to see. And so all the kids, they're staying up to all hours in their room, in a dark room, laying in bed, staring at the phone of these glamorous people that are having these wonderful lives. And they're saying, "Well, I'm
guilty
a loser."
of that.
They're saying, "I'm ugly. I'm poor. I'm not popular. These people are having this great life. Why am I, falling short?" But I think I'll tell you why you're falling short. Because you're ingesting poison through your eyes constantly in a dark room. God didn't put you in this beautiful earth to be in a dark room in your bed staring at fakes, influencers having fake lives. People that are really miserable a lot of times, who are, they're putting on a show. It's a show.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do that, well, one reason you're probably miserable is not only because you're doing that and because you're not getting sunlight, but because you're living for yourself and your own ego. That leads to misery. Get up out of the bed, go out in the sunlight, and go hold the door for somebody. Go sweep the floor for your mom.
That's it.
Go do the dishes so your mom doesn't have to do it. Go give a smile and a wave to somebody. And then you know what? It's not so much just about bringing them joy. You're going to bring yourself joy, and you're going to be focused so much on helping other people.
That's true.
That you're going to be filled with joy.
A Jesuit told me one time, the more he accustomed to through life, he was an old guy, old priest. He said the more he aligned himself with service, then there was no success or failure. It was all just service, and that's what it's about.
And we don't have to know. We don't have to know how it ends. We don't have to know the fruits of the labor, because we're not going to know. So we if you study history.
No, I know you're not going to know the fruits of the labor.
One thing in history, and I teach government and history mostly, and when you look at the debates about going to the Constitution from the Articles of Confederation, all right, well, there was these two sides. The side that wanted to just stay with the old Articles of Confederation, they were called the Anti-Federalists.
Okay.
And the people that wanted to go to the Constitution, they were called the Federalists. And basically the Federalists won. We go into this new the Constitution we're in now, right? And the Federalists are people like James Madison and Alexander Hamilton and stuff. So in a simplistic zero-sum way, you might say, we always look at the people, we say, well, those were the right people, those were the good guys, those were the winners. But the Anti-Federalists, one of the big things, they had a lot of good points. And one of the things they were pushing and saying, no. Well, one of their biggest things was our rights aren't listed in this Constitution. So, and they said, well, don't worry about it. Of course the that's because if you start listing rights, then the ones that aren't listed, and they said, no, there's no freedom of speech here that to protect me. There's no free right to bear arms that's in here. There's no protection of you putting troops in my house or all these other kinds of things that they had concerns about. And so eventually the Federalists said, okay, if you go ahead and ratify, we'll put in, first thing we'll do, we'll put in a Bill of Rights. We'll put in first 12, they proposed, I think, 12 amendments, 10 of them got through, called it the Bill of Rights. And so if not for these losers, in quotes, these people that were wrong, we wouldn't have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right to bear arms, the rights of the accused that we have. And so it's not for us to know how it's all going to turn out. It's just they were following what they believed and maybe what their calling was. And
yeah. And look where it came from. Yeah. That's something. It's really something. Yeah. And again, just it's fascinating. So anyway, what else?
Well, another thing I wanted to talk about was a lot of times with people, I talk about their life story. And so we talked a lot already, gone a while, but would you just tell me a little bit about what your parents were like before you were born and then your life story up until now?
I grew up in Metairie. My parents, my father, by trade, he was a metallurgist, like a chemist type thing.
Wow.
They wanted to move him to Emit, Louisiana. He wanted to stay in New Orleans. He had a growing family, so he became manager of Masson's restaurant. And back then, there weren't a million restaurants in New Orleans, but, so restaurant business was a little different. Almost by the lakefront.
That's a French restaurant?
Yeah, exactly. And so, he did that. I grew up in Metairie, went to St. Louis King of France, Bucktown. Great childhood, I think.
Did you play at a playground?
Yeah, Lakeshore Playground. Okay. I was horrible. And, back then you really kind of had to be good. So, I played sporadically. I loved it, though. I love sports.
Did you ever go to any restaurants in Bucktown or in the lakefront?
Loved it. That was back then.
What are some of the restaurants
Brunnings,
like back then? Mm-hmm.
Swanson's, Deanie's.
Brunnings got knocked down in Katrina, was it?
Yeah, Katrina. Then, George kind of wiped it out.
Okay.
And
I don't know about Swanson's. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, that was another one, but we used to like going there. But it was great. You had crawfish, raw oysters, and fried stuff. And Fitzgerald's, Brunnings and Fitzgerald's, I think.
Fitzgerald's left before Brunnings, right?
Yeah, Mr. Maurice Fitzgerald. He went to Aloysius. He was a character. I knew those guys because my father was in the business, and we'd go there pretty often. But Brunnings, I used to love Brunnings,
Yeah, I remember going there. It
was one of our first dates with my wife. And then, let's see.
You could sit out on the lake and just enjoy that breeze.
I know. It's not the same now. It's it's just not the same.
I wish I lived on the lake and just, because it's so hot and humid here. Yeah. But if you can live on the lake and just have that breeze going, it changes everything.
Right. There was Bart's right there, too, a place called Bart's.
Bart's. I think I've seen that name. Yeah, Bart's. Another place I go, it's a more recent place. It's only been, I think, 34 years, R&O's.
Oh, yeah. That's nice.
I like that. There's a lot of great places in Bucktown to eat. And also, I guess it used to be, after Katrina, they don't have this anymore, but with Sid Mars.
Yeah.
And there was I think it's called Captain Sid's.
You remember
maybe,
that.
And
you do remember
all those
that.
places where they used to have the boats. But now it's just a pumping thing.
Oh, no. And, playing at recess, we could smell the crawfish and all. Mm-hmm. Then I went to Christian Brothers because I was kind of bad, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I just wouldn't respond to women. My wife says I still don't. I don't mean to be sexist in saying that. I just couldn't. I didn't listen. So, but I became a great student at Christian Brothers. And back then you had to go to 8th grade. Then I went to Jesuit, just like my father, and then.
Is he the first generation at Jesuit?
He was, yeah. My son went there too, and then we got 3.
Another person who went to Jesuit for 1 year, Louis Prima.
That's right.
Italian.
No, he actually. Well, the story was he had like another month to graduation, and then I think he told one of the Jesuit priests or scholastics off. And he came back to Jesuit years later in the 70s and said he really regretted doing that. He spoke to the student body.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Al Hurt went there too.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, they were in the band. There's an award named at Jesuit named after my father for instrumental music, but it's for second place. And if you listen to him tell the story, he was like, well, Louis Prima and Al Hurt won the years before me, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Won the contest or whatever.
Yeah, I remember hearing a lot about Al Hurt growing up, but I didn't, like jazz was kind of passe by that time. And even Al Hurt, he was kind of more of a 60s, 70s, 50s kind of figure, right?
Oh, well, back then he was like late 30s, early 40s.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
yeah.
No. When he got popular, yeah.
Yeah, so like for me, so I was born in 75, so by the time I was coming up, he was already kind of a little bit old.
It was him and Pete Fountain.
Pete Fountain, I'd see a lot like at the fairgrounds. I'd see him playing his clarinet and stuff, and you'd hear these guys' names and things. But later on in life, I became a big Louis Prima fan.
Yeah, really.
And just
he made a lot of the Italian New Orleans experience and brought it to Vegas and New York and Chicago.
There's another guy that does kind of a modern day version of that. He's a comedian. His name's Theo Von.
Oh, really?
And he's a young guy. I think he's probably like in his 30s. He's from Covington.
Oh, wow.
But he's I would say probably one of the 10 most famous, most popular comedians in the world right now, and he's got one of the top 10 podcasts. And he doesn't live in the Louisiana anymore, but he references growing up in Covington and Louisiana stuff all the time, and he's just very Greater New Orleans kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so, like we were talking about earlier, you can't get that other places. So when you let that shine, you're just New Orleans way.
Yeah.
It's a very valuable thing to other people because they don't get that wherever they're living.
I met Louis Prima's son, and he plays trumpet and has like a band and does all Louis Prima's tunes. His son.
And did Louis he moved to Covington later on or something? Because I know I see a lot of things over in Covington. It's like Louis Prima way.
Yeah, Louis Prima had a golf course over there years ago.
Oh, that might be what it was.
Golf course and a country club kind of thing.
I remember when he
Happy Acres, I think it was called something.
Oh yeah, okay. I've known that.
On the North Shore.
He he did when the Jungle Book movie with Disney came out, and he had the songs for that. Babalu, yeah, and then. And then also just so much of the other. He mostly did standards that were not songs he wrote, but he just did them in his own way that you couldn't get without, that he did them in a Louis Prima, and he had Sam, his Camputera, and yeah.
He went to Holy Cross.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, because back then in New Orleans there wasn't too many schools.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he discovered Sam, but Sam was playing on Airline Highway. Right there by the way the Rouses was back then. And Louis discovered him, and he said, I want that guy.
Isn't that where Marcello's motel
exactly.
was?
That was right.
The Town and Day?
Well, it's Town and Country, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But a few blocks over.
Uh-oh.
Airline Highway. But it's amazing, right there at Airline Highway, and then you get this big...
And what was the woman that he had?
Keely Smith.
Keely Smith. Oh, yeah. They were wonderful together.
Yeah, they really were. But then they broke up, and then he had Gia Maione.
Oh, yeah. I don't hear too much of the stuff with the Gia Maione.
Yeah, she sang, too, or something. But
yeah, I liked it wasn't just the singing and the music, but it was all the whole personality thing. Even in the recordings, it comes through. It's like it's an act. It's like a vaudeville kind of almost mix with the music and everything.
Yeah,
and
she always looks so frustrated with him, and he's dancing around going crazy, and she's just real stone cold.
Yeah, or was it this is kind of a joke song, I think, with Keely Smith about, I can't remember it now. It's like he buys a sundae for her. He's like, I don't have any money. I can't remember it, but there's also so many of the music of his songs that the lyrics are either funny or, there's something about the lyrics. That's my complaint about a lot of the modern music is so much of it's just about sex.
Oh, it's horrible.
And just about like vulgarity.
It's not even good musicianship.
No. And so when they do actually have songs about some other subject, then a lot of times they'll become real popular, and because people are just so sick of just vulgar sex being the only topic. It's boring,
right?
And it's a lot of it's not good musicianship too. But some cases it might not be. It's not the typical. They might not be playing instruments or singing, but I definitely recognize great talent. I can understand why the person's so popular. Wonderful talent and stuff coming through, but even still, it's just so much of the topic is just vulgar sex, and so it's like, well, I understand. What you're doing is you're selling that to teenagers and preteens, and that's a titillating thing, and it's clicks, it sells tickets. And maybe that's all you know because you're 19 or you're 22 that's making the music. So maybe you're just singing about what you know. But I don't know. It's boring for...
No, it is. It's terrible. Wynton Marsalis has some interesting insights in it. All right, so let's see. Tulane. Then I went to Tulane, then Loyola, and then each for a year apiece. And then I ended up going into the seminary for 8 years. And during that time, they have you doing all kinds of different things, like working on the border, working with refugees. Then I went to college. They sent you to college, majored in history and philosophy because that's, you thought you were going to be a teacher the rest of your life.
Because Jesuits, that's what they do, teach.
That's right. And then so I taught at Houston and Tampa and Houston. Then when I got out, I taught at Rummel for 2 years to support myself, and then 3 years at Catholic Charities. Then I went back to work for the Jesuits in the development office. So like
were you working with Ardley Hanneman there?
No, this was Jesuit, the province, the priests and brothers to educate seminarians and to support missionaries. It was good work. Mm-hmm. Katrina came. Then I started working for J.S. Pollock Company, a bulletin company. I mean, these are Catholic publications. They do apps, that kind of thing. And I did that for 18 years. And then they went out of business last year. And then, I taught at Cabrini for a while. And then I'm with another company now called Diocesan.
And what does Diocesan do?
The same thing Pollock did, basically. But it's Catholic. It's the way parishes communicate with their parishioners. So it's through bulletins, an app, website, and
because I go to a Baptist church because my wife's Baptist, and so for the longest time we went to Catholic Mass, maybe a couple decades, but then being that she's Baptist, at a certain point she just said, "Look, really? I'm going to the Baptist church from now on." And the kids basically follow whatever she does. So it's like, you can keep going, if you want, whatever you do is you want to do. So I was just like, well, I guess if the rest of the family is going to do that, I'm going to go do that. Yeah. So I run the camera, one of the cameras at the Baptist. It's called First Baptist Church of Covington. It's one of these big mega churches. It's kind of like a church you'd see in Texas, one of those big old Baptist churches. But with them, the Protestants, they use a lot more technology. Like when we were dating back in the 90s, I'd go to Texas and we'd go to church with our mom there, and they'd have PowerPoint screens on, and it was really blowing me away that they have PowerPoint screens going, so you'd have the lyrics to the music and stuff. And I was saying, we should do this in the Catholic Church, because why do we have to look, in the missal or in the hymnal do it when we can have up in the PowerPoint, we could just follow along with that with so much of the stuff.
The good thing about it is that your eyes are pointed upward and stuff like that. Some churches do, like some big church, not here in New Orleans, but
yeah, I mean, that's
it saves on the money on the missalettes. I used to sell those too.
I guess where I was going with that is that they're very open to using your phone during the Mass, because because a lot of people nowadays, they'll read, reading the Bible is a big thing, and so they'll read their Bible on a phone app, like the Bible app I have, and so with the way the Baptist service goes, I guess a lot of Protestant services is like the first half hour they sing and play music, and then the people kind of either sing along or whatever, and they stand up, and then they sit down for the second half hour, and then the preacher comes in, and the preacher preaches about, a few verses, maybe 7 or 8 verses from the New Testament, and then does a sermon about that. And that's kind of what the service is. And and anyway, but it's fine to look on your phone with the Bible app. And so they do give you a paper thing that's about the sermon. But what I'm saying is, like, with the Catholic, we get the missal, we get the Clarion Herald after, and we get the.
But I mean, you know, I was at Mass this morning, and I mean, you know, I got the Laudate app, and it's got the readings.
Oh, so they are going to apps.
Well, I mean, you know, if I wanted to follow along with the readings and readings
they
right
do.
there.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
But I mean, you know, it's just another thing.
It's a challenge to adapt because especially society's changing so quickly, and then one difficulty for the church is that the church is reticent to change too quickly because of because it can be dangerous to change too quickly. It's also dangerous not to change too quickly, though. So it creates now we have the AI thing, which is going to fastly, is going to become a thing. And so the Protestant churches, they're a lot more entrepreneurial, and they can adapt. They don't have layers of bureaucracy. They can make changes and move.
I don't know if I agree with you on that.
Okay.
I just don't. I think, the biggest, like, communications media is the biggest. The church has always changed. The biggest observatory in the world one of the biggest is the Vatican Observatory. So I mean, the church has always been into that.
What I'm saying is more that the Catholic Church is more hierarchical, and so there's a bureaucracy to a certain degree.
Yeah.
So if a parish priest says, I want to put up PowerPoints next to our, I want to have people on their phones looking at the Bible or looking at the, this. He's got to get approved by the bishop. The bishop probably has to get approved maybe by the Conference of American Bishops, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas in the Baptist church, if the senior pastor is running a church, if you want, okay, let's do it. Boom.
Well, yeah, no, they could. So
that's what I mean by entrepreneurial is less of a. All right, well, let's wrap this up for today. I really appreciate you joining me.
Max.
We went this is by far the longest podcast episode I've ever had. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
I wish I could continue. I mean, it's just,
Let's have another episode sometime.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, bye-bye.